But there's equally strong evidence that all human beings have natural psychological needs, right? You need to feel you belong. You need to feel your life has meaning and purpose. You need to feel that people see you and value you. You need to feel you've got a future that makes sense. But we've been getting less and less good at meeting these deep underlying psychological needs. I think there's good evidence for that. And while it's certainly not the only thing that's going on, I think it's the thing that is driving these crises. So this is the loneliest society there's ever been. There's a study that asks Americans, how many close friends do you have who you could turn to in a crisis? And when they started doing it years ago, the most common answer was 5. Today, the most common answer, not the average, but the most common answer is none, right? There are more people who have nobody to turn to than any other option. This is part of an enormous array of social science that shows there's been an explosion in loneliness, isolation. Why are we alive? Why do we exist? In part, it's because our ancestors on the savannas of Africa were really good at one thing. They weren't, in a lot of cases, bigger than the animals they took down. They weren't, in a lot of cases, faster than the animals they took down. They were much better at banding together into tribes and cooperating. Just like bees evolved to need a hive, humans evolved to need a tribe. And if you think about those circumstances where we evolved, if you were separated from the tribe, you were anxious and depressed for a really good reason, right? You were probably about to die. You were in terrible danger. Those are the physical responses we still have to feeling isolated, yet we are the first humans ever to try to disband our tribes and tell ourselves that we can do it all alone, and it's a key factor in why we're so distressed. You're not, a machine with broken parts. You're a human being with unmet needs, and you need real love and help and support to get your needs met. And what I think is interesting is we've spent so much time and so much of our money and resources as a society trying to find a physical, technical fix where we have not succeeded very well. Chemical antidepressants have some role to play, but the best long-term research into chemical antidepressants, the STAR-D trial, shows most people taking them do become depressed again. I want to stress again, that doesn't mean they have no value, they have some value. But we just got to be honest, we've been massively increasing these attempted technical fixes every year for the last 35 years, and every year depression and anxiety has continued to rise. There's clearly something we're missing in those pictures. The most effective strategies for dealing with depression and anxiety are the ones that deal with the reasons why we're so depressed and anxious in the first place. What happens is the internet arrives and it looks a lot like the things we've lost, right? You've lost friends, here's some Facebook friends. You've lost status, because there's been a huge rise in inequality and humiliation at work. Well, here's some status updates for you. But what we've got is a kind of simulacra of those things, a parody of those things. The things we've lost are right there in front of us, right? We don't need simulacra, we don't need billion-dollar simulacras. And in a way, what I'd argue for is a kind of return to much more obvious insight. We all know that kind of junk food has taken over our diets and made us physically sick. But there's an equally strong evidence that a kind of junk values have taken over our minds and made us mentally sick. There's this phenomenon that's been identified as Facebook depression. So we know that the more time people spend on Facebook, the more depressed they become. And there's obviously a reciprocal relationship. Partly it's that the more depressed you are, the more time you're going to spend looking at it. But there's also some evidence there's an effect that goes the other way, which is, I think what social media does is it jolts you into an extrinsic way of thinking. I think Twitter is particularly catastrophic for this. So when you're on Twitter, what do? You immediately see how big the followings of other people are. You compare yourself to it. You're constantly, how many retweets did that person get? How many did I get? It jolts you into the most extrinsic kind of thinking. And of course, Facebook does that. You're seeing everyone's become like the paparazzi for themselves, producing this kind of curated, or like the Vogue photographer for themselves, producing this unreal curated depiction of their lives that you then compare to your actual life. These kind of junk values have really poisoned the culture, and Professor Cass has shown several reasons. So social media is one of them. The biggest thing is advertising, right? Advertising is the ultimate frenemy. We live in a machine that is designed to get us to neglect what's meaningful about life. If you create a culture where people have been deprived of the things that make life meaningful, they've been deprived of social connections, they've been deprived of meaningful values, they've been taught to value junk and bullshit, and they feel chronically dissatisfied and they don't know why, you will produce a lot of people who are just going to say, fucking burn it down then. We've created a culture where people's deepest psychological needs are not being met. And if our response to that is for a bunch of rich people to yell at them that they need to get with the program, that's the worst thing we can possibly do. a profoundly lonely society where people have got really sick values that make them really unhappy. I mean, everyone listening to this will know someone who works really hard at a job they hate to buy a load of shit they don't need, that they display on social media to get people to go, OMG, so jealous. And then they feel a peculiar emptiness because they've done what they're meant to do. They've worked really hard. They've bought the shit they've seen in adverts. They've displayed it on social media, but they feel terrible. So what happens? This is true for some of the people I love. They work even harder. They buy even more shit. They display even more aggressively on social media. We're in these cycles. We've been told a false story about what it is to be human. We've been told a false story about what it is to be happy. Krishnamurti, the Indian philosopher, Bengali philosopher, said, it's no sign of good health to be well adjusted to a sick society. And the most important thing I want to say to people about their depression, their anxiety, their addiction, is while all these things are deeply problematic, and it's not saying that this is a good state to be in, being depressed is the worst thing that ever happened to me, these are not internal pathologies in your brain. There are real things that happen in your brain that can make them worse, to be sure. These are symptoms of something that has gone profoundly wrong. Your pain makes sense. It means something. You feel this way for a reason. And largely, it's not you that's broken.